One more approach that I would like to bring in to this family of post-structuralist international political economy, which has had a lot of impact, not only in the sort of international relations field of political economy, but also quite interdisciplinary approaches to political economy, and which is really important today, is J.K. Gibson Graham's work on post-capitalism. Because of course, if we consider the fact that we cannot possibly carry on organizing our economic order and politics in the way we do in the age of global capitalism, simply because we will no longer have a planet to live on unless we change the discourses and the practices relating to the discourses of political economy. And Gibson Graham's work on post-capitalism in this regard is very, very important, because we need to start thinking about what sort of order could be built upon the ruins of capitalism. Post-capitalism itself would require a lecture of its own. But Gibson Graham, for instance, talk about diverse economies. They argue that economic orders are never simply capitalist or non-capitalist. For instance, as it was considered in the age of the Cold War, which never really possibly quite ended, and a lot of our political and economic thinking is actually built upon on the idea that the Cold War ended and capitalist system won. So Gibson Graham emphasized that economic orders, even within capitalism, are never simply capitalist or non-capitalist. They argue that within the interstices of capitalist and non-capitalist orders, there is actually a whole diversity of possible orders, practices, and economic languages and ways of doing the economy differently. And they argue that when this diversity is recognized essentially by means of, and I would argue essentially by means of deconstructing the capitalist and non-capitalist binary, it becomes possible to make alternative economic orders. And therein open possibilities for more just post-capitalist political economies. And it goes beyond the purposes of this lecture to think what those post-capitalist political economies might be. But my point is here to emphasize that post-structuralist approaches to international political economy give a lot of tools to deconstruct or think about the genealogies of global capitalism by which we have arrived to the point where we are at the moment, and as well as to consider the crisis and tensions and openings that could open ways to more just and ethically sustainable future. And this is of course something that I think you can try out in the exercises that you do for this course. Okay, so I'm just going to throw in a very, very kind of simple example to summarize what we've learned today. So let's consider, or a very simple example of the binary between capitalism and non-capitalism. So let's consider the capitalist or non-capitalist political economy of an apple. How is an apple a capitalist thing? It's a fruit. Well, at the same time, it's actually an export and import commodity. It's also a symbol of health in some discourses, and it's also a symbol of the original sin. While at the same time, it's actually a vehicle of transnational capital accumulation, being an export or import commodity. It requires labor. It is food, not only for human beings, but also for insects and pests, which then, of course, require all kinds of pesticides and poisons to be put on so that it can be produced as food for human beings. And already here we have quite interesting entanglements between non-human, human life, and within capitalist and non-capitalist realms and realities of the apple. So, post-capitalist and non-capitalist realities of an apple. It is an apple, it's a fruit, it's an export-import commodity, it's a symbol of health, symbol of sin, it's a vehicle of transnational capitalist accumulation. It's something that requires labor in order to be produced as food for human beings, and in order to be exported and imported and flown across the world and so on and so forth. But it's food, not only for humans, but also for insects and so on. It's food for pests. But then when it's food for pests, then we need pesticides. We need poison, which of course has all kinds of environmental impacts as well as impacts for human beings. Okay, but then we may have organic apples. But then we have organic apples, and also those need to be produced within the capitalist system. But and at the same time, there are non-capitalist orders where people can produce their own food and they can give and they can trade. The trading might not take place in money, but it can be something else, like non-capitalist ways of exchanging commodities, which challenges the present order. And now we come back to the question of ontology. What is an apple? What is an apple in political economy? And how is it socially constructed as a non-capitalist or capitalist thing in the world? And then when we start to rethink these really, really simple, that this kind of points out that there are no simple truths about the ontology of things in the capitalist world order. And when this is understood, then we can start challenging some of the prevalent economic truths. But it takes close reading, not only apples, but it takes close reading of the policies. It takes close reading of the kind of things that are presented as truths and inevitable things in the economic order in the present day politics. And it requires us to listen to those realities that are written out from the order that makes sense and seems rational to begin with. So, from the ontology of an apple in international political economy, we also then get to the question of epistemology, which is, as with any of the approaches that you would take from this lecture series, whether it's post-structuralist or whether it's Marxist or whatever, you need to kind of understand what kind of realities do these approaches construct about the world that you study. And this then, of course, has an impact on how can you know this world that you study? How can you know the global political economy? What is your what is global political economy, whatever the lenses you choose in analyzing it? And then how can you know this political economy and this reality? So that's the question of epistemology. What sort of data, what sort of methods, what sort of theoretical perspectives do you need when you analyze the international political economy of an apple in these various different realities, in these various different social constructions, would a post-structuralist tell you. This leads to choices as to what sorts of discourses make sense in your research design, for instance, in the ways in which you seek to understand the global political economy. And these discourses, you need to remember, make some realities present, whereas making some other realities absent. And when you take on the approach of, or the lessons from Poststructuralist IPE, you pay attention to those limits. You pay attention to those discourses and realities that you exclude by making some choices rather than others. Post-structuralist approaches to international political economy does not say that you cannot take choices. It says you must take choices. There is no, you always have to take choices. You always have to draw lines and boundaries. It doesn't say that you don't exclude things. It says that whatever you do, whatever you choose, you necessarily draw boundaries and exclude some things in order to make sense. But it asks you to pay attention to those boundaries and what that sort of meaning making does to the political economy. How does your understanding of the economy seek to domesticate the political? And how does the political eventually then mess it all up again? I then have one sort of this has been like talk, this lecture, but there is one exercise that we could do in the end. Here is an image of a crowd of people. I think there might be maybe 30 people, several men carrying children. They are by a sea. Many of them are wearing life jackets, orange life jackets. Their skin color is brown. Some women wear scarves, and they seem to be in distress. They are coming from the sea to the shore, and there might be some kind of a rescue operation going. This picture is taken, I believe, from the European southern border, the EU southern border at the Mediterranean. And it describes people coming from the sea and seeking to come to the land. They might have been in danger in the sea. The picture doesn't say. But what I'm asking you to analyze in this picture and ask yourselves a question of ontology. What is this in the picture? How is it a question of international political economy? How is it a question of capitalist or post-capitalist political economy? And what difference does it make how you respond to these questions? Thank you.